screening employees is I mean, generally speaking, restaurants for years have not allowed sick employees to come into work to protect our guests. So the idea of making sure your employees are healthy is there, but screening is new. Julia, what questions have come in from our members on screening employees that Pam can help us with?
So there's a lot of questions on whether or not employers need to take the temperature of employees. Can you provide further guidance if that is a requirement?
Pam, you're on mute.
One of these days, I'm going to get all this technology. It's not a requirement to take a temperature. It's good practice. You can also just ask them how they feel. You can do questionnaires, that kind of thing. Really, you're just trying to get a sense of whether or not they're feeling well that day. Most employers that we've been dealing with in phase 1 did start taking temperatures. They thought that was easier for them than just trying to get the employee to tell them whether or not they were feeling how they felt. Most employees, especially people, everyone wants to go back to work, they might tell you that everything's fine. So I recommend taking the temperature, but you can also just ask or do a questionnaire.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So you've seen some employers doing like a checklist, asking an employee just to kind of go through a self checklist and identify if they have any symptoms, and that would comply with the requirement.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Sam, any questions from the chat room on employee screening for science?
One question just came in about how do I handle an employee that calls out sick? Will they need to be required to take a COVID test before returning to work, or will a doctor's note suffice? So just around employees being sick and how to ensure that they're safe to come back.
And this really isn't necessarily L&I, and I don't know if it's Department of Health either. These are kind of new things that we're all thinking about. What I would suggest you do is if that, you do have somebody go out sick, I would ask them to at least verify tell you they went to the doctor, or get the doctor's note if you can. Because if, the problem will be, and like DOH might be able to answer this, if you do have a case of COVID-19, you're going to, once that person's identified, it's likely, you're going to have to close, and they're going to have to do the deep cleaning, and you're going to have to monitor all your employees and everybody that had been in contact with that person. So I don't know if you even need the doctor's note, because they're probably going to take that test, and your whole life will be very different if you guys have somebody with COVID-19. I don't know, Joe, do you have any better answer for that?
Yeah, I mean, we have a decision tree, which we're still actually, in the CDC guidance, this comes from CDC and through the Department of Health, and it does change a little bit. We're actually updating it, but in general, if an employee calls out sick, if they don't have any symptoms of COVID-19, it's just a call out sick for something different than COVID-19, then you treat it like any other call out. If, however, they have symptoms, which include, fever, coughing, shortness of breath, loss of taste and smell, those symptoms are online, then you would ask them, well, have you been in contact with anybody that's positive with COVID-19? And the answer to that, yes or no, determines how long they stay away. Right now, the guidance is if they are not a close contact with someone known to have COVID-19, they stay home until they have been symptom-free for 72 hours. I mean, it depends a little bit on the symptoms also, but generally speaking, fever is what we're really looking at, especially. They need to stay home for 72 hours after the fever. That guidance might change, and so if it does, we'll update our decision tree that we have online. If, however, they have been a close contact, my best friend or my significant other, whomever, they've been in close contact with someone with COVID-19, they have to stay home for at least 7 days total. And also, if they had a fever for those 7 days, they'd be up to 72 hours past that time the fever went away. So it's a little bit confusing. That's why we have a decision tree. And really, it comes down to the symptoms, I think, is a key to keep in mind here as part of it. And so it's COVID-19 symptoms. There are there is lots of guidance online to walk you through those scenarios.
Joe,
I hope
is it possible for you to paste the link to that decision tree in the chat room? Or if not, could you forward that to Julia so we can get that out to our members?
I can paste it now, but like I said, I'm going to put a caveat in there that it is going to change slightly. And so never hesitate, again, to reach out to your local health department or a healthcare provider when you have the questions like this, and to make sure that you're following the latest guidance. But I will send what we have in the chat room right now.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, I want to go back to any other screening employee questions, Sam?
Yeah, there was a good question around what LNI's recommendation would be on how long to keep the employee log. So if you're having employees certify that at every shift they are in fact symptom-free, how long should an employer keep that record?
We don't really have a requirement. I would suggest you keep it probably till we get to phase 4. I just keep it. I mean, I don't think shouldn't be a burden to keep the records, but I don't really have I could try to find out if we're coming up with the answer, and if so, I'll give it to you. But right now, I don't have a requirement for how long.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on the health department side?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit. Don't forget, like Anthony mentioned earlier, the industry has always been focused on keeping their employees and customers safe, and so this conversation about illness shouldn't really be anything new. And before we were talking about illnesses such as diarrhea, vomiting, sore throat with fever, jaundice, those types of things. Now we've kind of added to that because of the pandemic. And not everyone keeps records. I think a log is a really nice way to do it. It makes it simple and everybody, it's clear, but you don't have to do that. But if you choose to, I'm just going to throw out a number here that might pay because of such a long incubation period. And so if you're keeping that log for any kind of employee illness, including COVID-19 or the other foodborne diseases, I'm going to throw out 90 days.
Julia, any other insight from your conversations with the governor's office?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. I would think Joe or Pam, at least 15, right? Because of the incubation period and the time frame. So I think
specific to COVID. Yeah, specific to COVID-19, I'd say 15 days. But again, if you're taking the time to have a log about COVID-19 symptoms, you should go ahead and add in the other ones too, because we want to avoid foodborne disease as well. And then I'd say 90 days because of hepatitis A.
Okay. Sam, any other questions in the screening employee area? We have time for one more, and then we'll move on to the other areas.
It looks like there are a lot of comments of not being able to hear us, so I hope that hopefully it was just a little bit of a glitch. One thing that did come up was that Pam, you had said that if anyone has become ill or is exposed to COVID, a restaurant would have to shut down. But CDC guidance may say something a little different. So maybe just some clarification around that.
Unmute. I can't remember. She has to unmute. I think you're muted, Pam.
I am. I also think that's a Department of Health question. You're going to have to close down for some point in time if you do have something positive to clean your restaurant. You got to do a deep clean. That is part of the guidelines. So how long, I'm not sure.
Joe?
Can you repeat the question, please? I was typing, sorry.
Joe, so one of the questions was around if someone is ill with COVID or exposed to COVID. Pam mentioned that a restaurant would need to close, but the CDC has different guidelines, which include, separating where that employee was working, sanitize that area, and so just clarification on what the state is recommending.
I am looking real quick right now. I'm going to do the same thing on that question and get you another link just to make sure that we have the latest information, because unfortunately it does change slightly over time. So I'll include another link in the chat on that, and then Julia, make sure you see that, and you can use those links in other places as well. And this will also be linked. At least the checklist I know is going to be linked, and not the checklist. The decision tree I mentioned will be linked in the checklist. So you'll be able to see that link on the location as well. But I'll send you the link in the chat because again, it's a little bit complicated and it does change. So I want to make sure you have the latest.